think so. No, if not when it comes to fraud. If there's fraud, these people are lunatics. And if it comes to fraud, you wouldn't have an active Congress, and I'm not sure that you would anyway. But we just want to do the right thing. It's something that should have been done a long time ago.
So weighing in there specifically on Elon's conflicts of interest and also on the USAID push to effectively dismantle that organization, bring it under the State Department. More on that in just a moment. Democrats are starting to try to make a stand with regard to USAID in particular. The conflict of interest piece is also quite important. Elon obviously has massive conflicts of interest across the entire federal government. Just as one example, we documented yesterday how he and his cronies gain access to the Treasury payment system. I mean, Elon wants to turn Twitter into a payment processor, not to mention that for any tech overlord, having access to all of our data kind of an important and valuable commodity. I also was just reading that apparently he was influential in the pick that Trump made for the head of the Air Force. And it's a guy who, lo and behold, was very influential in getting SpaceX contracts for Elon. So he is officially, we now know, Sagar, a special government employee. I think Caroline Leavitt said that yesterday. There's actually a criminal statute that governs the way you have to operate and the way you have to avoid any potential conflicts of interest when you are in that, special government employee capacity. This is usually people who are brought in on sort of like a temporary basis as specific experts in a field. That is the designation that Elon has. So, I mean, it's wild what's going on.
That status is the same one that was used by Ivanka and by Jared, because they also didn't draw salaries last time they were in the White House. But as you said, it's actually legally important. I think you sent this Richard Painter, who's a government ethics expert, says a special government employee still have to abide by conflict of interest laws. And what I took away the most from the Trump comments is I think he could see some of the dangers here that are ahead with Elon, because he's like, well, we'll give him permission whenever we need to. Anything he doesn't need to, we'll take it away from him. They are saying that it's, quote, read-only access to the Treasury payments, et cetera. But no, you're absolutely right about that data. This kind of brings us back to our big debate yesterday, though. And look, I hate to give credit where it is, but mounting a fight about USAID is politically genius in a few ways. Let's put this up there on the screen, for example, where we have members of Congress attempting to enter USAID.
This is A3, guys. There we go.
So they've given some speeches around this as well. The thing that I'm kind of like thinking about with all of this, and it gets to what we were talking about yesterday, is at the end of the day, not only are we talking about an agency with 0.7% of the federal budget, which is now getting rolled into the State Department, but mounting a fight on USAID, which, again, some of the least popular elements of the federal government, which is foreign aid to other nations, just doesn't seem like the ground for the Democrats where I would want to be. And we're going to play some of the quiet part out loud things about what USAID is. I thought, the strongest ground that the Democrats or opposition to Trump have had so far is on tariffs, on Medicare, Meals on Wheels. Obviously, they abandoned all three of those, unfortunately, in the tariff case. We can talk about that in a bit. But the ground of fighting for USAID just doesn't seem like one of those political. To do it, you have to be reading the news and really involved. And be like, okay, so Elon has gained access and they've rolled it onto the State Department. It's like, well, you've kind of already lost it. And then people are like, well, how does it affect my life? It's like, well, some Malawian healthcare program may get cut. And people are like, okay, well, why were we even paying for that in the first place? So I'm just not sure this is the right move for the Democrats on this one. The Medicare one, the Meals on Wheels, absolutely. But I think it's very telling, right, that immediately the Trump administration bucked on that, where picking a fight on USAID, one of the smallest agencies, the only agency smaller than USAID is USTR, the U.S. Trade Representative, 0.7% of the federal budget. Overwhelmingly, if you were to poll this stuff, super unpopular. Maybe PEPFAR, is the only one where people are like, okay. The rest of it, we'll talk about the, money laundering and the CIA ops and all the other malfeasance and fraud that's run through USAID over the years. I don't think this is it. Like, I feel like the Dems are searching for something. And this is where they were like, we're mounting our stand here for USAID. Are we really weeping tears for foreign aid programs? Well, I'm not.
I think you make some good points there, but I think that is intentionally why they went after USAID first.
No, I agree. That's what I was saying. I have to give them credit for being smart.
Yes, they feel. I mean, first, I think there may be also a personal element here because USAID was also involved in, pushing for the end of apartheid. So there may be some personal South African hurt feelings there. Not a joke.
Is that true? I actually didn't.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. Right. Well, blame Reagan, right?
But in any case, they see it as a sort of trial balloon. Because if you can get away with dismantling USAID, which is, was authorized by an act of Congress, which, its authority comes from specific laws that were passed that give it statutory authority as its own independent agency. If you can get away with that, then you can get away with anything. And we already know that, Elon and Trump have both projected Department of Education is next. And, that'll be a more difficult fight because people like their kids being educated. And there's a lot of funding that goes for, for poor kids and for kids with special needs and for school lunches and things like that come from the federal government. But if you've already been able to dismantle one agency without a fight, then guess what? You are going to be able to do everything you want to do. And so, we'll get to the rest of the elements here in just a second, but I do think it's useful to kind of zoom out and ask yourself, what is Elon's project here? And we've talked about this before. Elon's ideology is not the same as what Trump ran on in, 2016 at his sort of populist peak. Elon is a fan of Javier Milei. Elon is an anarcho-capitalist. Elon is a fan of Curtis Yarvin, who thinks that we should have literal techno-feudalism. I know this sounds crazy, but Elon is he is an hardened ideological actor. So what does it mean if you're an anarcho-capitalist, if you believe in this like techno-feudalist project? I mean, he thinks he should basically run as a CEO the country, the government, the world, really. I think that is I know it sounds crazy, but that is his project. And you can listen to the way he talks about these things. I mean, his grand plans to have a civilization on Mars and all of these sorts of things. So if that's your ideology and that's your goal, what you want to do is completely take apart the federal government. And you hear this not just in Elon's rhetoric, you also hear echoed now in Trump's rhetoric, who talks about how his goal is for all federal government employees to be private sector employees. That's anarcho-capitalism. That means even the parts of the state that you like, the pieces that deliver for grandma and Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all of that, he wants to take an axe to. Elon has told friends that his entire metric is just how much I can cut. Not how much of the, the fat and the fraud and the abuse and the parts that everybody would be like, okay, fine, yes, cut that piece. He measures his success by just how much of the federal government can he take an axe to. Now, do I think that he is going to be able to realize his anarcho-capitalist, no state whatsoever dream? No. I think at some point, the state is going to reassert themselves. Trump still has control of the military, for example. At any point, he could get sick of Elon and say, all right, we're done, you're out, goodbye. But do I think a lot of damage could be done in the meantime? Yes, absolutely. And this is where, I want to come back a little bit to what we were saying yesterday and perhaps make a more persuasive argument about what I mean when I say people didn't vote for this. I'm not saying they didn't vote for cutting some waste, fraud, and abuse, et cetera, et cetera. But the Trumpist ideology, which is really like the Steve Bannon, that's the OG MAGA ideology, that was what was sold to people. And this is not that, right? This is not the political project this is not populist, right? This isn't the political project you've been engaged in. This is something else entirely. Trump seems to have bought into it and seems to have given Elon, for now, the keys to the kingdom to do whatever he wants, up to and including dismantling entire federal government agencies, accessing whatever classified information he wants to, accessing your Social Security numbers and private data, accessing the system, the Treasury payment system, which controls all of the money that goes out from the federal government. So if you imagine it's like if Fort Knox actually held all of the taxpayer dollars and gold and whatever, the richest man on the planet who has incredible conflicts of interest and a really radical ideology now has keys to that, theoretical Fort Knox. That's where we are right now. And that's why I find it so deeply, deeply disturbing, and why, even though you're right about USAID not being the best ground for Democrats to fight on, why I think they feel like, all right, well, we got to do something
I
here.
get where they're coming from,
Yeah.
but this is part of the problem, and this is where honesty